Welcome, my name's Rory, and today I'm going to be talking about 5 ways you can make better ski edits. Check this out. So that short little 1-minute video was filmed with my friend Jacob up at Lax. It's important to remember that every filmmaker has got their own style and aesthetic, and you know, that is very much my style of video. It might not work for other people, so you can adapt these rules and be creative with them to sort of build on your own style when you're doing this. Let's talk about what we can do on the snow with our camera while we're filming to make sure we give ourselves the best footage possible to edit with later. Something you really want to focus on when you're out filming is framing and composition of your shots. Things like camera movement and camera angles are sort of really key ones, as well as the focal length you're shooting with. All these things are going to give you a very different frame for each shot. Easy ways to do this, you know, get down low to the snow, film from really low looking up. Get far away with a long lens and sort of really zoom in on your subject. Alternatively, get really close so you're right amongst the action. You know, stick it on a tripod and do some tripod shots. Get it on a gimbal, do some follows, shoot some handheld. Just mix it up so you've got a variety of different shots. And this will also depend on the mood or the style of the edit you're going for. That edit that you saw at the beginning was all shot handheld, everything. I didn't use a tripod or a gimbal or anything, and that was because I wanted to have a little bit of that camera shake and I wanted to be there in the action so that I could build that sort of chase feeling through that video. You can see here, for example, Jacob's moving from the right of the frame to the left, whilst the camera is moving from the left of the frame to the right. So these sort of opposing movements help give the shot a really sort of cinematic feel, as opposed to just standing next to that feature and filming Jacob hit it. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, it comes back to your own style, you know, that sort of skate style filming. That can work really well, and sometimes you can get really great shots doing that. Another thing you can think about with framing is the focal length of the lens you're using. If I'm using a longer focal length like this one, as opposed to a sort of wider one like this here, you're going to have a very different look and feel to your shots. Particularly with background compression, and you can use that to your advantage to help immerse people more into that scene. So don't be afraid to shoot on a longer lens. Another easy one is to think about foreground elements, you know, get something between the camera and the subject that then can create a lot of depth through that frame, and again build that sort of interest. So play around with different framing, camera movement and different angles to keep those shots interesting. The next thing that's really important to think about when you're filming is direction of flow, and what this means is which direction is the primary movement throughout the sequence or scene. And in this case, if you look at the intro video again, you'll see that Jacob was always moving from the right hand side of the frame to the left hand side of the frame. The only exception to that was when he's going up the lift, which I intentionally filmed with him going left to right, so that it's really obvious that he's moving up and then down. This helps the subconscious brain of the viewer to stay engaged and understand what's going on in your video. Essentially, if you keep changing those up, your viewer's going to get confused about what's going on. They're going to lose track. Sometimes you can't follow this rule if you're skiing and you can't film every feature from the left, let's say. Film it from the right, flip it in post. People will never know, and it's going to make that video just make a lot more sense. Number 3. Build a story. It's really important to try and weave some kind of narrative, even if it's very, very basic, into your edit. That way, people are going to be left with a much more lasting impression, and they're not just going to be watching a montage of someone skiing or riding. So using the example of Jacob there at the start, we used a very simple story construct. We were going for that sort of one run top to bottom feel. So we open with a few shots of him riding the lift, getting off the lift, dropping in, sort of tension builds as he rides down, and then he sort of ends his run at the bottom of the lift. So it's not super complex, but it helps to give the edit some structure as opposed to just being a bunch of random shots. I used a lot of really quick cuts between shots to really help sell that idea that he's gaining speed, gaining momentum, making his way down the slope. And without those shots, it would have just been a series of shots of Jacob hitting rails, hitting jumps. So those little shots are really what makes that story sort of come together. So don't forget or underestimate the importance of B-roll and cut shots in your edits. Number 4, this is a big one, kill your darlings. This is really difficult, but when you're editing, it's much more important to have a short edit that is full of really good shots that work, that serve a purpose, that tell the story, than a longer edit that has a few unnecessary shots or extra fluff. Quality is better than quantity. It's an overused saying, but it rings so true in video editing. It's very difficult sometimes to let go of shots you like, but you have to remember that the viewer is not going to know if they're not there. The main thing to ask yourself is, does this shot add to the story? Do I need this shot here, or will the story still work without it? A good example of this is, let's say the athlete or this rider you're filming does a really cool trick. It was the only shot you got of that trick that day, but you messed up the filming. It's not worth keeping that really good trick with the terrible filming. Give it up, find something else, or change your story to adapt around it. Or even better, go out and refilm it and get it right. Something else you'll see a lot in ski edits is repetition. And what I mean by repetition is you'll see a lot of shots that look very, very similar. Perhaps it's the same trick over several different features, and unless that is an integral part of what your edit is or the story you're trying to tell, try to limit yourself to sort of one shot of each trick or one shot of each feature. It's going to make your video flow more, be more interesting to watch, and keep your viewers more engaged. Alright, sound. So sound is also really important. Sound is 50% of a video. Sound can be broken down into sort of 3 main areas: your audio, sound effects, and your music. The main thing is just invest in a good mic. You don't need to spend a lot of money these days to get a pretty decent mic. You know, something like the Rode VideoMic Pro, which we're recording audio on right now, or even simpler, something like this guy, the little Rode Micro. This one costs, I think, 80 bucks, and obviously the more you spend, the better quality you're going to get, but for most people's purposes, something like this is perfect. Make sure you're not cropping your audio, it's not peaking above 0 decibels. And really the easiest thing you can do is just carry a pair of headphones and stick them in and listen to your audio while you're filming. Music is super important. It helps set the tone, it helps provide the emotions to the viewer, and helps sort of tell that story, as I mentioned earlier. This is going to be very dependent on what sort of style you're going for in your video. So again, I used a sort of classical tune for this one at the start because it had a lot of build, and I really wanted to build that tension and sort of build momentum throughout that edit. But I also tried to pick something that wasn't too dramatic or sort of too over the top. It's very common that people will put a song on that it's just too much, you know, and it leaves the viewer expecting too much. If you've got that sort of stereotypical heavy dubstep song on your edit, people are going to expect hammers, and if you're not throwing pure hammers, then people are going to be disappointed. So try to avoid the cliche music, pick something that's a bit more appropriate, and I would say be conservative in your music choice. Music is, to be honest, probably the hardest part of editing. I think I probably spend 60 to 70% of my time when I'm editing looking for music. Last thing is sound effects. Sound effects are amazing. They can really transform your video. Again, it's a whole topic of its own, and there's so much that goes into sound design and sound effects. A good place to start with sound effects is just to try and find some kind of ambient background noise that you can drop over your edit that's just going to help tie those shots together. If you can do that at the very least, that's kind of enough for most cases if you've managed to record good audio in camera. So there we have it. That's my 5 tips for making better ski edits. Let me know if this is helpful or if I missed anything, and also let me know if you want to see more videos like this. This has kind of just started for me as a coronavirus project to allow me to keep making films. So we'll see how this goes, and if I get lots of positive feedback, maybe I'll make a few more videos. So let me know your thoughts below, and I'll see you in the next one.